Okay. So, like I said, this is just going to be a review on what you should know about inflation, what we should be able to interpret about it, how we should be able to kind of talk about it, what's going on with it, discuss it, explain what it is. So you know, not only have to define it, you have to explain it, and we're going to have to also show it mathematically. So a lot of applications of inflation, particularly on this upcoming exam. So it really is almost like a third, 30%, 40% of this exam. So let's get started. I wanted to go to, that's not what I want to share. This is what I want to share. Okay, so I wanted to just go to the study guide and talk quickly about some of these equations. So I'm not sure if you guys have taken a look at this yet or taken a look. If not, no biggie. But let's see, where are we? So from here down, from this real GDP down, these are all the equations that have to do primarily with inflationary changes, price level changes. So you know what, before we even get going, let's talk about just the definition of an inflation. Can anybody kind of tell me, either of you tell me what's going on? When I use the word inflation, when I say the US currently is experiencing a little bit of inflation, what do I mean by that? Can anyone kind of sum it up in a sentence or two?
That would be the decrease in purchasing power of a certain currency, correct?
Wonderful. That's one way to say it. So you know what? There are a lot of different ways to kind of interpret this inflation. That is exactly correct. Spot on. We are losing value of the US dollar. So when you hear your grandparents, I always think, I remember back to principals, I always thought about my grandparents because I remember my grandpa saying, oh, I used to be able to go to the store and walk out with this, and this for $10 out of my pocket. And so it's kind of a running joke that things used to be a lot cheaper, and that is thanks to inflation. So the thing is, it's not as dramatic as maybe grandparents might make it seem, as I'm making it seem. So in that time, so say in the time of our grandparents, 80 years ago, 3 decades ago, 4 decades ago, anything further, let's think about, the thing is, yes, we're walking out of the store spending a lot less, but the thing is, with the amount of income we were receiving at the time, with the amount that other goods and services were priced at that time, that $10 was a significant portion of maybe that income you were bringing home. Same as if you were to go to the store now, it's probably going to be going to the grocery store, probably going to be a significant amount of your income to be able to purchase and bring all that home. The difference is that total on the receipt we're getting. When I walk into Walmart, instead of in 1920, not that I don't actually know if Walmart was around then, but if you think about going to the grocery store in the 1900s and my receipt says $15 and I'm walking out with a cart full of goods to make dinner for the week. Now I might go to this grocery store and walk out with groceries for the week, but it's costing me $75 now rather than $15 that 100 years ago, 80 years ago, whatever it is. So the thing is that US dollar is losing its value. It's still probably a very significant amount of our budget as it would have been 100 years ago. Relatively speaking, our budgets have remained pretty constant. The value of this dollar, what we're seeing on the receipts, this number, this arbitrary number, that is what's changing, okay? So I uploaded a video today on eCampus talking about inflation. And one way that they described in that video, there was an example. It was an in-class experiment where they said, okay, here is a magazine worth $10. Here is a $10 bill. And here is a $10 coupon for a car wash. All of those things are paper. Relatively speaking, they all are worth $10. What's the difference? If I were to tell you, I want you to throw 2 out of 3 of these out, what's everyone going to choose out of those 3 goods? Can anyone tell me what they'd want between the $10 bill, car wash coupon, and a $10 magazine?
Just the money.
Of course, I of course want the money. Unless for some reason you really need a car wash and you said, wow, great, I'm going right to the car wash. I value this $10 car wash more than I value this $10 bill, which could purchase a lot of different other things. So in that sense, we learned about this characteristic of money first module, I think. This is medium of exchange. So one thing money has is this medium of exchange where no matter what, people are still going to recognize that the US dollar holds this value, right? We're still going to accept it in exchange for other things. So when we talk about inflation, that unit of account, we think about unit of account, store of value, and medium of exchange. We have less power in that dollar. So in order to use this as a medium of exchange, the value of that dollar goes down. We're going to need more dollars to make up for whatever we're exchanging this for. Does that kind of make sense? Just kind of introing inflation. What kind of goes into it? All right. So next, all right, next, I'm going to give you guys another definition of inflation. So yes, we are losing purchasing power of a $1 bill, of that $10 bill, of whatever my income is. I might be receiving less from it because of inflation, or so the saying goes. So when we talk about real GDP versus nominal GDP, we think about what kind of goods and services are being produced. So inflation can also be defined as our money supply going up while the amount of goods and services being produced stays constant. That's not changing. So if the amount of goods and services we're producing as an economy stays constant, it's not changing, but the dollar value on these goods are going up, or it a lot larger than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago. From last month to this month, we can calculate that inflation change, because right now, the thing is that these dollars are increasing quicker than we're increasing any kind of real change in our economy, any kind of real growth. We're not accompanying this increase in the money supply with actual growth in our economy. So that is the difference between this real GDP and this nominal GDP. We're going to adjust for that change in price. So that brings me to the next topic. First thing I saw this morning, actually, let me share. Are there any questions going from that? If I'm going too fast, please let me know. So the first thing I saw this morning, waking up, was this news article. So from the New York Times, I get an email saying inflation is coming. That's the big headline. Who's to blame for these rising prices? So what this article kind of goes on to talk about is how prices are up 6.2% over the last year. All these, we have shortages occurring because of issues in the supply chain. We see these numbers. So we can say that if I were to go to the grocery store last year versus this year, I'm seeing on average 6.2% increased prices. So I'm walking out of that grocery store spending 6.2% more in that money term, that money US dollar currency than I would have last year. Okay. So going down, it kind of talks about some of the circumstances that have led to this inflation we have at this time. There are a lot of different things that can lead to inflation. And the circumstances right now are kind of unique because of the pandemic. This is like kind of a really weird, unique time. It's a really cool natural experiment for like social researchers, but really terrible in terms of just everything. So it's kind of creating these circumstances that we haven't seen before. So what is leading to this inflation this time around? Or so this article is claiming. Like I said, there are a lot of different factors that lead to that inflation, including the issues in the supply chain that we're seeing right now. But one big factor of inflation right now is the large stimulus package that was passed about a year ago. So we think back to when President Biden last year approved the huge stimulus package. We all started receiving these stimulus checks. And then we can also think just last week, we signed a $1.9 trillion package for even more relief. So in terms of government spending, when we think of GDP, government spending goes up, GDP goes up. This is real change. In this case, what we're seeing is we're spending all this new money. We're printing all this new money in order to kind of pad the pandemic. We're kind of trying to pad down the effects of the pandemic on our economy. But because of that, we're seeing, like I said, this increased inflation that in the short term, we weren't worried about. We were more worried about the economy collapsing at the time. We were more worried about shit hitting the fan, really. Now, a year and a half into this pandemic, 2 years into the pandemic, we're starting to see that all this money that was being poured into the economy now didn't have that real sustained change. Now we have these inflation measures where the dollar bill is starting to lose its value. So this is kind of a cool article. And it actually is like economics in real popular news and media. So I'll put this on the eCampus, our site. But like I said, this kind of just helped make things click for me, at least, in terms of reviewing inflation and price changes. So are there questions on this article and how kind of inflating the economy with this money, all this stimulus spending, all this government debt, injecting the economy with all this extra currency is one huge factor to why we're seeing this inflation now. So with that being said, one thing I want to show you guys is the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So this is one website that economists use every day. It's a data collection database for different labor statistics. So we're seeing unemployment, we're seeing real GDP, we're seeing price changes, things like that. So it's a government-run website. So all the data is super reliable, really cool. So just looking at some of these numbers. So we know the CPI is kind of that grocery basket. It's that basket of goods that we think on average a household is typically purchasing. So the CPI changes from year to year, but we're going to see common goods like milk, eggs, poultry, chicken, meats, things like that. They're going to stay constant, you know, oil, electricity, gas, things like that. These are always going to be part of household consumption. So these have stayed constant in that CPI, in that basket, right? So what the CPI does is measures these goods that a typical household will use and consume. We're going to measure the price changes from year to year. Okay. So these are some of the goods, and these are just the price changes in this year. I believe, 12 months. So if we look at all items all together, there are different measures of inflation. So this big word inflation really just means price change. It's telling us what have these price changes, what's happening in terms of price change. So there are different measures of inflation. So we need to know what kind of inflation we're talking about, right? So in this case, we're talking about 12-month inflation. So if we were to talk about 80-year inflation, 90-year inflation, inflation is a lot higher than it was 50 years ago, 60 years ago. And all of these are measures of inflation, just changing those time periods. So we can measure the inflation rate of any given time period, okay? So for this one in particular, we're measuring the 12-month change. So just from last year, overall, on average, we're spending, like I said, 6.2% more. In terms of just food, we're seeing about a 5.3% increase. That's kind of crazy if we think about it, even just from last year. I don't know about you guys, my salary did not go up. So if I think about it, I am losing more money at this time. I'm not only losing the purchasing power of my dollar, my income stayed constant. So I'm going to have to still make it work, even though these prices are going up. I have less disposable income. Okay. So one sector that has actually seen massive, massive inflation is the energy market, energy sector. So we can see these numbers are really pulling up that average inflation overall. But I mean, all of these numbers are kind of like scary looking, if you ask me. I mean, inflation is occurring, it's happening, and it's here. And these numbers are definitely, like I said, this is a government run website. These statistics are very well researched. So these numbers are definitely showing that the US is experiencing an inflation right now. All right. So that's just what this histogram is showing. Okay. Questions on that? So I'll hang you guys in since you came here. And let me stop the pause real quick, or stop the thing. And lastly, like I said, all this data is really kind of cool. And this is what's going to show these different measures of inflation. So this CPI, if I wanted to go to Data Finder, let's see if I can just see this one. Okay, so this is all urban consumers in a city. So from January of 2019 to September of 2021, this is the inflation. This is the price level change we're seeing. We're seeing a positive price level change. So that's where you're losing that value in the dollar, because prices are kind of artificially being jacked up. We lose value in that dollar. All right. I feel like I had something else to say about this. Oh, I guess this is just a line graph. Like I said, this one before this was a histogram. Might be a bonus, hint, hint. This is our line graph showing that inflation. So let us now go through one more example. And once again, this is something that I really think you guys should know. I want you guys to know before Friday, and you should study before Friday. An example like this. So with all this talk about inflation, price level changes, how I'm probably going to go ahead and test you guys on something similar to like this is going to be calculate that basket we're talking about. So in this case, this is a very simplified example. The CPI, I think, includes maybe over 100 things. I don't know, over 200 things maybe. I'm just totally kind of eyeballing it. But in this case, for the exam, I'm going to have you do something similar where you need to calculate a basket. You need to say, this is what's happening. These are the price level changes. Are they positive? Are they negative? Yeah. So let's go through and do this practice problem together. This will probably take 25 minutes in itself. If you guys want to work along with me, that's great. If not, I'll show you guys on the screen what's going on. So let's get started. So we're going to fill in the blanks here. So we're going to start up top here, just with this basket. So like I said, we have 3 goods here: cheese, blue jeans, and gasoline. A very simplified economy. We have a very simplified CPI. So within these goods, sorry, one last thing before moving on. This is the equation you guys are gonna want to know and study before Friday. Ooh. Right here, this CPI equation, where we are basically just weighting changes from that base year to changes in our current year. So it's a weighted fraction in this case, kind of, where we're multiplying the quantity of that good. So we're going to see in this case, we're keeping the same quantity from year to year. So it's comparable. And we're going to multiply that by the price during that time. So our numerator is going to be all current year prices, and our denominator is going to be all these base year prices. So like I said, in the same way you can calculate inflation for any year, we can calculate the CPI change for any given years. So in this case in the case of this example, we are doing 2000, 2003, 2006, okay? So year 2000 is going to be our base year in this case, all right? Oh, yuck, no, we wanted. Here we go. Year 2000 is going to be our base year. So let's go down through and see. In this case, we have in that first base year, our price is going to be $1.75. Our quantity for this good. Oh, quantity's here. I was like, wait, what the heck? Quantity for the good, 2 pounds. So what we're going to do, multiply that quantity by the price for the current year. So 2 times 175 is going to give us that 350 right here, right? So that's going to be the first good added to that basket, okay? So same thing, we're going to do it for blue jeans and gasoline. So what we're going to do is add up all the total costs for all 3 goods times the amount of the quantity we're going to be comparing. So if you think about in the CPI, what this quantity kind of means is like, say I need to purchase 10 dozen eggs for the average household. It would be 10 times the price of each dozen of eggs. You know what I'm saying? Where that quantity is coming from. So we're going to add together all of these quantity times prices, and that's going to give us the total cost of the basket. So then in order to measure the CPI index is then going to tell us what is the change, what is the number relative to our base year. So using text, I'm just going to type these numbers in. Going down the line, we have 2, our quantity for blue jeans, 2 pairs times 12 a piece. We're going to have $24 for that, the total cost there. Total cost of our gasoline is going to be 10 times that $1.25. So we're at $12.50. All right, so the total cost of this basket is going to be that 24 plus the 350 plus the 24 plus that 12.50. Okay, does that make sense to everyone where we're at right now? Okay, very simple, very basic, just adding up together the cost of this estimated household basket. So in this case now, 1640. So this base year total basket cost, yeah, is going to be $40. Okay. Okay, so let's do this for year 2, year 3. Here we have that per unit cost is now $1.50. So in this case, just eyeballing it, can anybody tell me what's going on here? The price actually goes down and there's a word for it.
Deflation.
Deflation, amazing, I love it. So in this case, we're actually seeing deflation. So we have $1.50 times 2, which is going to be $3. Moving down the line, we have $15.50 compared to that $12 that it was 3 years ago. So we are seeing an increased price in our blue jeans So this is going to be $31 for the 2 pairs of blue jeans. And then lastly, that gasoline is going to be $16 because the price has increased to $1.60 and we have that quantity of 10 gallons. Okay. And lastly, we have year 3 or 2006. So you might see it either way. I want you guys to know year 1, year 2, year 3 is just referring to the base year, the second calculated year, the third calculated year. Doesn't mean that it has to be one after another. Okay, so same thing here, $1.50 for our cheese, $3, 20 times that 2 pairs of blue jeans, we're up to $40, and $2.70 now for a per unit gallon of gas. So per gallon of gas, we're up to $2.70. So now we have $27 for allocated to gasoline in our basket. Okay. So calculating our total basket for 2003, we have 34 plus 16. We're at $50 for our total basket. And then in year 3, we are now at 43, 70. Someone want to check that? Good to go. I know, see. 70. Yeah. 70. Okay, so we can see from year 2000 to year 2003 to the year 2006 that the same amount of these 3 goods, I can go into the store to purchase these 3 goods in each year, and I'm going to walk out paying a different amount each time. So we see how those price changes over the years, but at the same time, we're still receiving the same amount of goods. We're still receiving the same amount of service. So now moving on, this is going that $40, $50, $70, that is the total cost of our basket. Moving down, now we'd like to calculate that CPI, that index, that price level change that's going to tell us, okay, now let's calculate the inflation rate. So I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's calculate the year 1 index. So in this case, let's go back to, I'm going to be so annoying with these equations because once you know the equations, everything else makes a lot more sense. So we are going to be using for that CPI. Actually, do I not even have it in here? Oh, CPI of our current year. This is the equation we're going to want to use. We're going to do, in order to calculate the CPI of your current year, you're going to have a base year, a comparable year. So in our case, we're using year 2000. And then to calculate year 2003, year 2006, we're going to put those on the top. So let's go back. And like I said, for this base year, what we're going to have is just 40 divided by 40. We have $40 in our base year, our current year, divided by that base year, 40 times 100 is going to give us 100. So when we're talking about CPI, this is the consumer price index. It's a pricing index that is able to show us price changes. It's just a way to track some of these price changes, okay? CPI is just, like I said, it's just this basket of goods that we're going to track over all these years. The government said this is going to be the easiest way to track these price changes, to see what households are consuming and to see what happens to those prices over the years. So that CPI for the base year is always going to equal 100, okay? So that's going to be where we start at 100. If our CPI equals 100, we're either at the base year or we have no price changes, no inflation, no deflation, no price change in that situation, okay? So to calculate our year 2 index, oh no, well, I didn't realize our annotations would go away, but we started at 40, 50 here, and 70 here, right? All right, so for our year 2 index, what we're going to do is that 50, because our CPI basket is equal to $50 in this case, over our CPI of that base year, which was $40. multiply that by 100. So 50 over 40 is going to be 1.25 times 100. Which is going to equal 125. So our CPI in this case is equal to 125. The way we kind of use these terms are also kind of weird too. So that's why I'm kind of using the lingo, saying it again and again, just to try and help you guys pick up on it a little. So the CPI in year 2 is equal to 125. So calculating that year 3 index now, we're going to have 70 in that year 3 divided by our original base year of 40. So now in this case, we have a 1.75 times that 100 once again. And our CPI in that year 3 in 2006 is now equal to 175. All right. So now we have our totals for, our totals for CPI. We can actually calculate the inflation rate now based on the numbers we just got. So let me write up here what we had going on. So year 1 CPI equals 100. Like I said, that base year is always going to equal 100. It's always going to be what we're comparing year after year after to. Our year 2 CPI was 125, and year 3 was 75. Okay. So now what we want to do is calculate the actual inflation rate from year 1 to year 2, from year 3 to year 1, whichever it may be. We want to calculate the actual percent change in these prices, okay? So the CPI is a fun way, it's a good way to kind of measure these price changes over the years, but it's not giving us the full story. I want to see the percentage change in these prices over the years. So to calculate that inflation rate, we're looking at this equation right here. It's our CPI of the most recent year. So actually, I'm gonna write this out. I don't like the way that's written. So the CPI of our most recent year minus the CPI of that base year, which I'll denote with just that 0, that null. And then that entire thing divided by that original CPI of that base year again, okay? Times 100. So let's calculate year 1 to year 2, all right? Year 1 to year 2, we're gonna have 125 minus 100, all divided by 100. Multiplied once again by 100. So in this case, we have 25 on top over 100, 1/4 times that actual 100. Actually, .25. So in this case, our answer is going to come out to 0.25. So our inflation rate from year 1 to year 2 is 25%. We're reading that as 25%. Does that equation make sense to everyone? How we're getting to that inflation rate of 25%? Is that okay for everyone? All right.
Yes. So the
Yeah.
CPI of the base year or the beginning index is always going to be 100, right? Because we're comparing the base year to the base year. So that'll
Correct.
always be 100.
Correct. So say the thing is, I could compare, well, I guess it is here, year 2 to year 3. It doesn't always have to be that base year necessarily. That's why I put beginning index here. But whichever year we want to compare it to, whichever year it's relatives to. So in the case of our CPI, when we're calculating that and we say, hey, year 2000 is that base year, that's going to be what our CPI is equal to 100. When we're calculating inflation rates, it doesn't necessarily have to have a CPI of 100. Does that make sense? One is one, but one is not the other.
Got it.
So let's do year 1 to year 3. So in year 3, we had 175 minus 100. So we have 75 on top, right? Does anyone need me to write that out? Cool. Okay. Over that initial year 1, where we had 100. So this equals 0.75. And then from there, we want to divide this by, sorry, I'm just going to type it out like this. 175 minus 100. They're those CPIs divided by the original initial CPI in that year 1, which was 100. Multiply that entire thing by 100. So 75 divided by 100 is that 0.75, and 100 equals 75. Does this make sense to everyone here why we have a 75% inflation rate from year 1 to year 3? Good on that? All right, and then lastly, year 2 to year 3, this one's a little different. Like I said, we don't always have to compare it to the base year. The base year is what we're comparing the basket to, but not necessarily inflation. So when we compare year 2 to year 3, we have 175 minus that 125 divided by 125 times 100. So we have 50 over 125 times 100. 40%. Does this example make sense? Are there any questions about what we just did? All right. So like I said, that is going to be a big part of the exam. If you guys can walk through an example like that, you are just in the clear for Friday. I will say some of the multiple choice questions will have questions where you have to calculate maybe like CPI of this year, maybe calculate the inflation or price change of a good. It won't be anything this extensive, but you might see something this extensive on the part 2, part 3, the extended response.
Do we have to have all of these equations memorized in advance, or will they be provided to us, or could we have them written down? Or
so you know what, I will actually, I will allow you guys, I'll send out an announcement. I'll include the equations on eCampus, but I will let you guys write equations in advance. Let's say that I'll give you everything that was on all of these equations. I'll upload just this picture probably to for the exam. But if you want to write additional equations or kind of like write like tips on like notes on these equations, like if you want to like put asterisks and whatever it may be, I'll let you guys have one page with this as well, additional. You'll just have to show it to the CrowdMark camera, or not CrowdMark, the Respondus camera. All right. Okay, so that's kind of the biggest stuff from price changes that I thought if you guys, like I said, let me stop my recording.